All right, we are live. Hello, I'm Howard Mann, creator of Conscious Shifting, and welcome to Conscious Shifting. Before we get started, a quick warning and disclaimer. Conscious shifting and all known side effects will improve your physical, mental, and spiritual health while providing the ideal environment for spiritual awakening, helping you live the life of your dreams and influence the world in a positive way. So, if you think that that's something you'd like to be a part of, then follow us here on Facebook or subscribe on YouTube, and then join us Wednesday nights, 6 p.m. California time for Conscious Shifting. If you have a question for us, simply place it in the comment box of the live, a replay of the live, or one of our daily thought provoking posts, and we will answer it from a spiritual perspective. So, with that, let's go ahead and get started. Everybody take a deep breath way down to the belly button and relax. And one more time, big deep breath and relax. Let's do one more. Big deep breath and relax. All right. So, tonight's topic is how to get into heaven without going to church. And I see Susan and Kim so far. Welcome. So, if you have found a church that you like, and especially if that church is helping you on your spiritual journey, then this live may not be for you. However, if you're uncomfortable with church because you find church lacking, then you're probably going to like this. Perhaps you see through the misperceptions in the teachings of the church. Maybe you just get the feeling that they don't really have the understanding necessary to help you. A lot of people are somewhat frightened to think that they're going to go to hell just for being human. Um, sometimes people become depressed when contemplating the idea that God would create you as you are and then condemn you for being the way you are. So when the church tells you to fear God, do you find that confusing? Because if you do, you're not alone. On some level, though, we all resonate with truth. At the same time, on some level, we all don't resonate with falsehoods. So whether we realize it or not, deep within, we know the truth. So let's go through a few of these. Hi, Kathy. How you doing? Now, as I go through these points tonight, just pay attention to your initial reaction to them and see if you get kind of a quick negative reaction or is it positive? In other words, do you get the sensation that somehow you know this to be the truth? This is a critical skill. And so I think these things will probably make it a simple introduction to that idea. And what I'm really getting at is listening to your intuition. It's how God speaks to us. You already know the truth because you are the truth. That's the ultimate spiritual truth behind what I'm getting at tonight. But we're going to break it down a little bit. So, number one, hi Tina, how you doing? Hi Christina. Number one, God is not sadistic. Does that strike you as being something negative, or do you resonate positively with that? Because if you believe the core teachings of most religions, then if you follow those to their uh, conclusion, then you would have to say that God is sadistic. And yet, when I say that, you probably react to it as if no, and that's God's not sadistic. But the thing is that generally all religions teach that there is God, and God is all knowing, and God created everything that exists. So far, so good, right? Now enter the idea of punishment. Not so good. Some religions teach about a place of punishment after life, such as Hades or hell. Others teach about punishment during life, and they'll teach you that natural disasters and disease, for example, are the wrath of God. Some teach a little bit of both. The, the point here that I'm trying to make is that in an attempt to understand God, humans have projected human qualities onto God. Qualities such as judgment, anger, and revenge. But God's not human. God, therefore, would have no human qualities. God's beyond the physical realm. God is spiritual. Therefore, nothing of the physical realm would apply to God. How could it? Physical life, specifically human life, when viewed from the viewpoint of the ego, gives rise to emotions such as judgment, anger, and revenge. Non-physical spirit, however, is non-judgmental perfection. Spirit is only capable of love, compassion, and understanding. So why would we fear God? For an all-knowing God to create imperfect beings, such as humans, and then punish them for being imperfect would make God sadistic. But God is not sadistic. Suffering is created by believing that we are separate from God. But God does not inflict this upon us. We do this to ourselves. We punish ourselves with our false beliefs. Hi, Cheryl, how you doing? So that's number one. God is not sadistic. Two, religious rituals do not equate to righteousness. And yet they're practiced, and it's generally thought of that way, that that's righteousness. But rituals are not necessarily righteous, are they? So is that how you're reacting to it? Oh, wait a minute now. No, not necessarily. Just because it's a religious ritual doesn't make us righteous. The spiritual realm is not of this world, and therefore nothing in this world, that at least as it currently exists, is truly spiritual. However, spiritual truth explains reality, and not just the universe that we live in. Spiritual truth explains who and what we are. We are not humans trying to have a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings temporarily in the human condition. And we can't be anything other than what we are. Now, we can believe it to be so, and therein lies the problems. And that's where these rituals come in. Rituals, religious rituals, that is, are mankind's attempts to be spiritual. Now, there's no problem with practicing religion. However, when we assume the viewpoint that we need to become spiritual, we are operating from the belief that we are not spiritual. And that belief prevents us from being spiritual, because what we're actually practicing is not being spiritual. You follow that? And then wonder why everything gets all goofed up and why there's all these problems, because we're practicing not being spiritual. So we're manifesting things that are not spiritual. We're in that instance, we're actually denying spiritual truth. And yet a lot of religious rituals are just that. It doesn't make a lot of sense when you really stop and think about it, does it? For example, can you make sense of attending church on Sunday asking for forgiveness and then going out and sinning all week, just doing all the stuff you ask forgiveness for, then go back Sunday. Oh, forgive me, Father, for I've sinned. That's not really um attempting to change in any way. It's not really deserving of forgiveness. It makes a mockery of the whole practice. Expressing the truth of God is by living it is honoring God. Seeing others as God sees them and treating them accordingly is the highest form of worship. But is that what you see people doing? Very rarely. Very rarely. uh, yeah, here we go again. Number 3, without free will, life is meaningless. How do you react to that? Does that sound like something that's truth? Do you react to it like that's a lie? So when I first mentioned these things, there's only 4 or 5 of them, but when I first mentioned them, the reason I wanted you to see how you reacted to it and just make a note of it was to try to teach you about intuition. And if you're in fact in touch with your intuition, then the explanation should confirm what you initially thought was your intuition. And if not, then there's at least some food for thought. Kim says, I react that it is questionable. Well, that's fine. That's fine then. That's honest. And there's no right or wrong answer here. I'm just I talk about that a lot, just in brief passing, intuition. Maybe we need to do a whole live on just that. This is kind of like that, but I'm really I've done it. In fact, I wrote this some time ago, a few years ago, I think. Um, but maybe we'll do a whole live just on design to really get into the whole intuition thing. But just make a note of it, because a lot of people don't really understand the difference between intuition or um, spirit whispering in their ear and ego. But you really have to evolve spiritually. You have to learn to differentiate between the two. And what you'll probably find is that the majority of of everything that you thought was right was nothing more than ego. Um, but that's a start, isn't it? It's a critical step. So number 3, without free will, life is meaningless. Now Christina says that life is meaningful. There you go. There you go. So there's no heaven credits. You know, we can do things to prolong heaven, but there's no way to earn it. You can slow it all down. You can make it take a lot longer, but you can't really earn it. It's not something that you earn. Um, when do you, for example, feel defeated when you're told that you have to follow a set of rules without question? Because that's kind of what religion does, isn't it? They say this, and this. You must follow this, or you're going to hell. And you're not to question it because it's the word of God, and therefore you can't argue with it. And Christina says, "Did you say before that we learn things in life, and if we don't, we repeat it over and over?" I have said that. I have said that. There's within any if you think about a spiritual journey as the process of self-realization, discovering who and what you are, which I'll just tell you right now is spirit, an eternal spirit, part of an eternal spirit that we're all part of. All of us together make it up. The whole is, from the viewpoint of the human condition, these separated beings, but we're not separate. You can't separate from yourself. And so, but here we are, and we buy into this reality that this is it. The physical world is reality, and these mind bodies and our thoughts and emotions and the senses that we have, they are who we are. None of that's true. And so the spiritual journey is kind of unwinding all of these false beliefs that we've adopted. As you do that, you rise in consciousness. So you can think about self-realization as this rising consciousness all the way to where you 100% know who and what you are, which we could also call Christ consciousness. That was the level of consciousness that Christ operated at. So that's the end game. But in the meantime, there's these levels of consciousness, and within each level of consciousness, there's certain beliefs. And these beliefs manifest a certain reality. So there's lessons to learn, is one way to look at it. And until we learn these lessons, which we'll talk about that process, the process of becoming truth, we'll wrap it up that way. But there's these lessons to be learned within each level of consciousness. And only when we learn these lessons do we transcend into a higher state. And really what's going on here is that everything that we're attracting into our lives, the people and events, are the characters and the props that we attract for the explicit purpose of creating an opportunity for us to realize a higher truth. So our level of consciousness is attracting these kind of like-minded people with levels of consciousness, and this interaction within that is our lessons or opportunities to understand things on a higher level. When we do, then we transcend that, we attract something different. So yes, if you fail to learn the lesson, then you're going to repeat it. People and events are going to keep happening to bring that opportunity to you until you finally get it. And it can be throughout a lifetime, and it can be throughout many lifetimes. At some point, yeah, we'll understand. And when we do, then we can kind of move on. You look at the world and what's going on in it. Well, you want to know where people are consciously, take a look at what's going on. All this hatred and this violence and aggression and this division, and that's all anti-spiritual. That has nothing to do with God. The evil that exists in the world, nothing to do with God. That's on us. We've done that. We're projecting that because in here we have shame and guilt, anger, hatred, all these negative emotions because we bought into this stuff. It really, when you get down to it, we bought into the idea that we're separate from each other and we're separate from God. And that's a very big problem. That every problem that is known to mankind goes back to that. It's a manifestation of a belief system in which we believe we've separated from each other and from God. If you really stop and think about that, if we understood that we were all one spirit, then how could there be war? There couldn't. How could there be crime, starvation, poverty? How could there be any of the problems that we face? There couldn't. The only reason they exist is because we believe that we've separated. And so now it's us against them, me against you. It becomes a game of predatory gain, personal gain, and done in a predatory way. It's evil. It's what it is. But that's the level of consciousness that the majority of the people on the planet are operating at. Very few, in fact, are not. And that's the why we have the reality that we do. So, yes, we will repeat the lessons. And you're seeing it on the world stage over and over and over, you know. Um, so it's on a personal level. It's also on a collective level because our own personal experience has more to do with what we have in here. The world stage is a collective reality. So it's all of us and our inputs that are influencing this reality. I mean, the universe and everything in it. Kim says more like similar vibration. Right. So you attract things from the manifestation. Let's put it that way. You know, we are constantly manifesting, whether we're aware of it or not. The majority of that's done on a subconscious level, and that has to do with our beliefs. So we have these memories and these stored programs. They're basically energetic commands that are broadcast out into space time, and they create reality. And collectively, we're creating this reality, all of us put together. Although most people they don't understand that, but that's what's going on. So you're these lessons and the people that you attract into your personal life are more of a result of the level of consciousness that you're holding or that you are at the moment. As you rise in consciousness, then you're going to be dealing with higher vibrating beliefs, which hold higher, they're associated with higher levels of consciousness. And within that higher level of consciousness is higher information and energy. And so the manifestations are going to be of a higher order. Eventually, when we all self-realize and move back into this oneness or God consciousness, there will be heaven on earth, or what you would describe as heaven on earth, because we wouldn't be capable of creating anything else, because that at that point, that's what we would be. We would be supreme consciousness, void of all these false beliefs that are causing all of these problems. Christina says, so we can get to heaven by being on a higher level, and we don't need church to do that. No. And I'm not necessarily knocking church or religion. I know sometimes it sounds that way. I know sometimes I knock, it sounds like I'm knocking government or the media or religion or science. And in some ways I am, but it's not, I'm not doing it to be, negative in any way, just to simply point out the error in that thinking and how low level it really is. Again, this is conscious shifting. If you're going to shift into higher consciousness, you have to kind of understand um, that there's something not quite right going on. That opens you up to the possibility that there's something else, and then you will, when you're open to that, you'll attract something else in. You begin to understand that. As you understand that or learn the lesson, you'll become it. That's when you rise in consciousness and you'll manifest something of a higher order. So that's the process. Kim says, as we learn and grow spiritually, we vibrate at a higher level. Exactly. Yes. See, that's the thing, Christina. The free will is something that we have. And I'll get into that a little bit here. Um, but it's when you identify with the physical world and you believe in this separation, and you believe that we're separate mind bodies interacting with all these other mind bodies, and all these games start getting played. When you understand that we're really just one spirit, and at this moment, we find ourselves in the human condition, and so the appearance is that we're separate, but we're not really. It's just different aspects of the one self. Think of it that way. And as long as you're aware of that, you can play the game of life, and you'll be fine. The problem is that people start identifying with that as reality and forget all about the higher truths. That's the problem. As we descended into matter, we started believing that we were that matter and that this physical reality is reality, rather than understanding that consciousness expanded needed some place to expand and express itself. So in other words, think about consciousness, this non-form, this spirit, whatever you want to call it, God. And one of the things about consciousness is that it's natural for consciousness to express itself. Well, if you're all one, and you're in a realm of no form, and you want to express yourself, you have to have some means of doing that. The example I like to give is that of music. If you want to express yourself musically, you have to become a musician of sorts. You have to have a musical instrument, and you have to have an atmosphere with sound waves that can carry the vibrations that we call music. It's the only way there's going to be music. And so, if you're spirit and you want to express yourself, you have to have a means of doing so. So, you expand and you create other realms in order to express yourself. So, the point of being here is to express yourself. But this is a weird place. It's a realm of space and time. And so, in order to operate in that, we have to have these mind bodies with these senses where we can navigate space and time. The problem is when we start identifying with those mind bodies as our identity, and we start believing in the physical world as the reality. So then we find ourselves a prisoner of these false beliefs, and actually create spiritual blocks to expressing ourselves, which is why we came here in the first place. It's insanity. The point is to express yourself, allow spirit to flow through you and into this world. But that's only going to happen if you're operating from a spiritual perspective. Once you've identified with the ego, which is the viewpoint of the mind body, so that it can navigate time and space. Once you accept that as your identity and this physical reality is reality, then you've just descended into madness, and you end up with what we have here, which basically is hell. But it's all a matter of consciousness, and we can't forever deny who and what we are. And so at some point there will be heaven on earth, or something that we would call heaven on earth. But it's only going to happen when we hold that level of consciousness, and collectively we're a long ways away. But yes, um, you can get to heaven because it is a state of consciousness. You could be there now. Um, it's just operating on a higher level of consciousness. Um, and you don't need to go to church for that. But if you have no understanding of anything spiritual at all, then church is a great place to start. At least it moves you closer to God. It's a great stepping stone. That's the way I look at it. So I only knock it because at some point you have to move beyond the physical realm to express yourself spiritually. And religion, because it's based upon the physical world, limits you in that way. But as a place to start, it's great because at least it accepts the idea that there is something more than this. Because as long as you believe that this is it, you're never going to evolve. You know, you've created spiritual blocks, making it impossible to evolve. Kim says, as we learn to grow spiritually, we vibrate at a higher level. Indeed. Susan, it's the dark night of the soul. All this craziness is on us. I totally agree with what you're saying. I'm almost done reading your, the new book. Well, the next one's going to, the next one, I'm really going to get into the dark veil, the dark night of the soul, as you say. That's probably where I'm going with the next book. But I'll do a live on the dark night of the soul, just to kind of put your toe in the water, so to speak. Kim says, and is that why we always, without fail, resonate with truth? Yes. Yes. Because we are truth. Truth and God are one and the same. And we are that. So we resonate with it because we recognize it as home. And even if we've suppressed that, even if we're suffering from spiritual amnesia and we really don't understand who and what we are, we will still resonate on some level with that. So when we're living a life contrary to what we know to be the truth, it creates inner conflict. And that inner conflict is then projected out onto the world, and this is what you get. But that inner conflict, you've hit the nail on the head. It's that inner conflict is caused when we live our life one way, knowing that we are something entirely different. So, you can't hate anybody. And be in connection with your spiritual essence, because there's no, or any negative emotion for that matter, depression, anxiety, anger, hate, shame, guilt, all this stuff, even pride. Those are all negative emotions, and they're all based in ego. Spirit doesn't have an ego, so it doesn't have any of those emotions. They don't exist in spirit. That's a really low level thing. So those are red flags. You see, when that's why I was asking at the beginning, see if you react negatively or positive to some of this stuff. And I'm trying to kind of give you an intro into intuition, but at the same time recognizing negative from positive, and the negative should be a red flag that indicates that you're being triggered by something, which means that somewhere you have some emotional or spiritual trauma associated in some way with that, and that's why you're being triggered. So it kind of, like I said, most manifestations are done on a subconscious level. But if something triggers you in that way, it's a window into your subconscious. And it gives you the opportunity to work on things that you didn't even know you needed to work on. Didn't even know that trauma was there. You just think, oh, that's just the way the world is, or that person's just that way, or he's just a whatever, no, they're not. And even if they were, it should not trigger you that way. If it does, then you're resonating with that energy, which means that you yourself inside have that energy. And so somewhere there's some toxic energy that you've stored up. And that needs to be released, is another way to look at it. It's unhealthy, and it prevents you from rising in consciousness. Dense. We are. But think of low vibrating frequencies as dense, and yeah, we're a very dense species. uh Christina says, I could be there now. Yes. How? Well, by self-realization. In other words, by understanding who and what you are, but be careful what you wish for. Because a lot of people think of spirituality is all this wonderful, flowery, warm, fuzzy butterflies and unicorns, and no, it's not. I mean, ultimately, yes, it is. It's bliss. It's heaven. It's void of anything negative. It's unconditional love. It's the light of God. It's all those things. But to get from where most people operate to that, there's a lot of lessons involved, and you have to learn them. You have to go through it. You have to process it. You have to understand it. And then you have to become a higher truth. And you keep doing that until there's nothing left to process. So yes, it could be done in an instant, but I've never known anybody that's been able to do that. They say that happened to Buddha. He sat under a tree for 7 years and then in an instant was enlightened. Jesus came into it when I believe when John baptized him. It just the spirit came over him, and I mean he was always spiritual. I'm not saying that. But like I said, it's a process for most people. But in those two instances, yeah, it was supposedly something that just happened all at once. But most people, that's not the case. It's, lifetimes, thousands of lifetimes sometimes. Doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. Yes, I'm aware of it at all times to answer your question. But I can't say that um I don't have little slips and things, but I catch myself quickly. But yeah, very much so. I'm aware of it at all times. Heaven, that is what you're asking about, and that's how I know. That's how I know these things. That's how I know what the future holds, not the immediate future. That is going to be troublesome. But yeah, ultimately, yes. Kim says, but to keep balance, don't we need a little madness? So to speak, it comforts us to think in terms of, well, if it wasn't for, you know, the bad things that happen in life, you wouldn't recognize the good. There's some truth to that, but that's still operating in lower level stuff because you're splitting it like, okay, well, this is higher than that, or this is lower than that. There's some comfort in that because we do go through some stuff that we would call bad, we would judge to be bad. And so knowing that there's purpose in that makes us feel better. And there is purpose in it because we learn and we move on from there. But you're still really dealing with a world of the duality at that point. And spiritual consciousness is completely different. It's if you can live in harmony with all of these supposedly opposing, or they're really more complementary, but opposing forces. If you can live in balance with that, you'll actually rise above it, and there won't be anything to judge. There'll just be this spirit, the kingdom of God, as they say. Um, so an example would be that everything that you do or don't do in this world has consequences. So karma. But you can rise above all that. If there was a shortcut, it would be something, excuse me, along the lines of letting the divine guide you. So in other words, you'll create karma and a lot of it if you're operating from the ego. On the other hand, if you let spirit guide you, since spirit is far removed from all of that, then you'll transcend karma. There won't be any. The yin yang behind me. That's what that really means. Is that in the world of reality, there's this constant cycle, and one becoming the other, and then back again. And if you lean one way or the other, feminine, masculine, black, white, hot, cold, however you want to see it. If you lean one way or the other, you're out of balance. So to have harmony, you have to, that's why they call it centering. Like in the center of a tornado, the eye of the tornado is calm. When you center yourself and live in harmony with these opposing forces, which is really like a form of acceptance and surrender, then you just rise above it. They no longer have any pull on you one way or the other. There's no longer good or bad. There's just spirit. And then there's what's non-spirit, which is what the world we live in. Spirituality is 2/3 work. Yeah. Yeah. So back to the free will. When you're told that there's a set of rules that you have to follow and you can't really question them, that's kind of a defeating statement, is it not? Does it make you wonder why God even bothered? Again, we're kind of personalizing God, but why, in religious context, religion tells you that, there's a set of rules, you got to follow them or you're going to hell. Well, does it make you wonder why God even bothered giving you a brain then? That doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? An all-knowing God would not give us free will unless we were supposed to use it. And to even hone in on the point, there would be no point in choosing anything unless we choose it out of free will. The value in somebody doing something for the greater good is not that they did something for the greater good. It's that of all the choices they had, all the things they could have chose, they chose the greater good. That's what gives it the value. And somebody would do that because they're becoming the greater good. You see, your actions, your thoughts, and as an extension of your thoughts, your actions are all based on your beliefs. Growth is the evidence of life, and in order for there to be personal growth, there must be a lesson learned, right? But then we must choose to do things differently. It's not enough that you just understand that this is a more right thing over here. You have to actually choose to do that. Knowledge through experience, followed by action based on that knowledge, equals personal growth. And that's really the purpose of life. And it's meaningless without free will. So on a spiritual level, in every decision we make, we have a choice. We can choose the greater good, or we can choose something else. And I would throw everything else into that second choice. And our choice makes all the difference in the world. It's either the greater good or it's not. It doesn't so much matter what, a lot of people, oh, well, this is special interest, but it's for a good reason. Well, if it's not for the greater good, then it's not for the greater good. It's anti-spirit. It doesn't matter what your motivation is or what you claim it's supposed to be, because it's divisive. Racism. It it doesn't matter who did what to who. And trying to make up for it isn't going to cut it. If you want to end racism, then you have to stop separating people according to their race. You have to see them as just another, at least human being, but another spiritual being. The skin colors are irrelevant. Anytime that you treat them in any way for any reason based on the color of their skin, it is by definition racism. It's not the greater good. You see that? And that's why I say it's either the greater good or it's something else. And whatever it is, if it's not the greater good, then it's anti-spirit. It's just that's a simple way to understand it. Hi, Katja. Exactly. The greater good is for all, not just ourselves. So seek the solution that everybody benefits from. Everybody. And then you get away from this duality. So how can you wrap this up if you took, I mean, every great spiritual teacher that's ever walked the planet and taught hit on this. And what you could say about it is that the truth is threefold. First, you have to be ready for the truth. And then when you're ready for the truth, you'll start to recognize things as being the truth. And then you have to understand the truth. And finally, you have to become the truth. That's when you really get it. You become it. And then you manifest it. So what we're talking about here is really spiritual consciousness, spiritual awakening, a process of shifting from our current level of consciousness into higher consciousness. When we realize something's missing, then we're ready for the next shift. So you see through the nonsense, you gain some understanding, and with that understanding, you choose differently. And when you do, you then become that truth. So you become the truth when you live it. The truth is of the spiritual realm. It's focusing on physical aspects of reality takes us further away from spiritual reality. We just form a more sophisticated state of confusion, that's all. Distancing ourselves even further from the truth. The physical reality is temporary, and it exists within a much larger spiritual reality. And you can't learn the truth because the truth is not of this world. Nothing in this world is the truth because everything in this world is constantly changing. There's no permanence here. It's all an illusion. But the truth never changes. It always is what it is. And that's what we're really here to express. So, you hear a lot of people say, well, there's your truth and my truth, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. No. There's a lot of falsehoods. There's a lot of misperceptions. There's a lot of partial truth. But there's only one truth. It's that never changes. It cannot be proven wrong. Your own personal experience will confirm it. And it never changes. It always is what it is. And that's also a definition of spirit. Deep within, we already know the truth. It's a matter of connecting to it and allowing it to emerge. Hi, Cynthia. As Kim says, the truth is within. Christina, please make a program on everything is illusion and explain in full detail. All right. All right. Well, I kind of do that, but we hit on different topics. Each one is just a different way. If you really want to know the truth of what I do here, I get out of the way and I let spirit talk. That's what I do. My ego would be no different than anybody else's. But all of these topics and conversations and answering questions, it's just different ways to remind you of what you already know. That's what conscious shifting is. It's shifting into higher states of consciousness. It's the process of self-realization, realizing that you are actually an eternal spiritual being. So everything is, and that's why spirit is multidimensional. There'll be whoever's listening and whoever listens to the replay, and people all over the world, they even have to use some of them, what do you call it, a translator to understand the conversation. But spirit speaks to everybody, regardless of what level they're at. They're going to get something out of it. So each week is a little bit different, but it's all about reminding you of who and what you are. That's what it is. Christina, if we are living truth, how is it an illusion? Because we're not living truth. If we were, heaven would, this would be heaven. They're one and the same. Truth, God, spirit. That's one thing. And then there's what we have, which is something other than that. So it's an illusion because it's always changing. There's aging. There's deterioration of everything. There's this constant cycle of birth and then life and then death. And everything in this world, the weather's changing, the seasons change. There's all this change. The spirit always is what it is. So that's one reason why I refer to it as an illusion. The other one, which we can get into in another live, is that you don't actually see, hear, touch, smell, taste anything. Those are interpretations by the brain of the energy that exists. And then based on our beliefs, we understand that in a certain way and take that energy that we sense, and it goes through, like, for example, your eyesight. The light goes in, light energy, protons, hits the back of the eyeball where there's these receptors, rods and cones, that creates an electrical impulse that runs through the optic nerve into the brain. And then the brain tries to make sense out of that. And based on our beliefs, creates an image and projects it out onto the universe that we mistakenly believe is reality. It's like a projector is projecting this image out onto the universe, but we're not actually seeing anything. We are interpreting energy and then projecting this something that we're trying to make sense out of into something that we can understand, and projecting it out into the universe and calling that reality, when it's really all in here anyway. It's all an illusion. That's another reason why I call it an illusion. But it's always changing, and it's not what you think it is. It's just an interpretation. Kim says we are truth. We just don't know it, so we live the illusion. Exactly. So attending church is not a requirement for getting into heaven, but understanding truth is. Spiritual teachers can lead us to truth. However, we must become truth. And this is a process. And until we realize the truth, we're spiritually unconscious. And then so is our manifestation. So being spiritually unconscious is equivalent to being locked out of heaven. The next step in mankind's evolution will be spiritual. And we're all in this together. So in the end, we're all going to get into heaven. In fact, I would say that no one's going to get into heaven until we all get into heaven, because we're all one being. That's also an illusion, which is why it's not that once you start understanding this, you have to write books and teach, but it's why people who understand some spiritual truths write books and teach, because they understand that we're all just, as Ram Dass says, walking each other home. No one's going to get there until we all get there. That's a spiritual truth. But the truth isn't something we learn. It's not something we earn, and it can't be forced. Force is the way of the physical world. Force is not spiritual. Any attempt to force spiritual reality results in preventing it. We can only allow it to happen. And we all have the possibility of entering heaven in this moment. Still, we are only ready when we're ready. And when we're ready, we will resonate with a higher truth. And those who are of a higher truth will help. They'll be there. When the student's ready, the teacher will appear. It's just how it works. You'll attract it. The more spiritually conscious we become, the better our lives become. And by letting divine knowledge flow through us and into this world becomes more and more like heaven. As each of us shine a little bit brighter, we're able to shine a brighter light for those who follow. And so collectively, we move towards heaven on earth. Group hug. There you go. Yes, everyone. I touch on it in a few places in the new book. And at one point, I think the way I sum it up is that, well, I don't want to give it away, but we're suffering from a lot of heavy psychological problems here. We have this insane view of things and accept it as reality and the truth, when it's far from it. But what I will say about that is that it's not only possible, it's the only way it can happen. If you understand that we are one spirit, then how could some of us go home without all of us going home? We're one entity playing all the roles, all the parts in this movie here on earth. Look at it that way. But it's just one entity, one person, so to speak, one spirit playing all these parts. So there's no way that a couple people could go and see y'all later, sucks to be you. It doesn't work like that. It can't. We're all one spirit. So the only way that we're going home is for everybody to go home. And so this interaction between us, when Ram Dass said we're all just walking each other home, that's what he was referring to. Our interactions are helping to remind us of who and what we are. And when we remember who and what we are, we'll be home. So it's this whole thing, heaven, you could even say, or understanding heaven, is the process of becoming truth. We connect to truth and allow it to flow through us into this world. Then the infinite lives through us. The infinite can be understood through working for the greater good, unconditional love. You want to find God? Work for the greater good from a perspective of unconditional love. And while you're doing that, you'll find God standing right next to you. The more we help others with the process, the deeper our level of understanding becomes. Consequently, as we enter heaven, we help others who are ready do the same. Life becomes beautiful for everyone because heaven's not a place, and it's not this event in the future. Heaven is a state of consciousness. It's here and now. We either realize it or we don't. The truth is that heaven on earth is the future of mankind. And the truth is, collectively, we are the ones who will create it because we are it. We just have to realize that. So that's hey Chris. that's that's it for tonight. We'll do a healing circle, but we'll do some other stuff other nights. That's pretty that's enough for one night, is it not? Awesome. Yep. Thank you, Chris. Here we go. So Christina asks, what about the non-believers? They don't and won't become one. Eventually they will. Eventually they will. They're part of it. They're just in denial. Be loved. That's the key. Right on, Chris. Hi, Sherry. All right. So let's move on to the healing circle and then we'll wrap things up. So let me get a sip of tea. Wet my whistle. All right, everybody gather around, form a circle, join hands. Gently close your eyes and your mouth, breathing through the nose down to the belly button area. And then exhale back out through the nose. Another nice deep breath. Way down. Inhale peace. And then exhale all tension. And again, deep breath of peace. And exhale tension. And one more time. Big deep breath. Inhale peace. And exhale tension. Okay, continue breathing on your own. Follow the breath as it moves in and out of your body. Just consciously ride the breath. And feel your consciousness or your energy expanding. Notice your energy building and moving through your body and expanding beyond your body. So follow your energy, follow your consciousness down through your feet into Mother Earth, like you're growing roots out of your feet that are going down into the earth, deep, deep, deep down into the earth and spreading out so that you're connected to the entire planet. You got that? And then expand from the top of your head up into the heavens, up into the atmosphere, up into the solar system, the galaxy, the universe, and beyond. So what you're doing is you're consciously expanding to all of physical reality and then beyond to spiritual reality. And you can do this because one, you happen to temporarily be in a physical body, and two, you also are an eternal spiritual being. So what I'm saying is become conscious of all that you are. And so all that exists is within your consciousness. And when you bridge the earthly and heavenly energies this way, then spirit can flow through you and into this world. So breathe it in. Breathe in spirit. You are it, and it is you. Pure consciousness. You are. We are. There's no self. There's no other. there's no pain, there's no suffering, and there's no disease. There is only the illusion of separation and the reality of consciousness. So let's sit with that for about a minute and then we'll close. Okay, now before we close, let's take this level of consciousness, bridging the spiritual to the physical, and now down from the heavens, down through us, through the feet, down into the planet, all parts of the planet. Since we're projecting, let's project this. We are, there is no self, there is no other, there is no pain, there is no suffering, there is no disease. There is only the illusion of separation and the reality of consciousness. And so it is. All right, slowly open your eyes. Let me hide this, close that. And so that is, hi Becky, how you doing? And so that is it for this week. Until the next time, I honor the God in you, and remember, the only way to bring about the greater good is to be the greater good. Good night.